And thank you for inviting me to this great conference. It's really nice to be here. It's very nice to be in Bali in Indonesia. It's a lovely place. It's even better outside. I will have a short talk now for 10 minutes, and I will speak rather fast, but not too fast, I hope. So you will follow me. And it is actually connected to what Professor Anne Gregory was talking about. While I'm not focusing on AI, I'm focusing on the transformation aspect of communications and public relations in a managerial way. And I have five key points I can mention initially. This talk is more about management and communication, and it's also based in a forthcoming book that will be published together with some colleagues on Routledge next year. This idea, this mindset that I'm trying to present here is based very much on a description of how management has developed in society. In a simplified way, we speak about it as a development from a crafting society to the industrial society to the late modern society. All these transformative aspects that we tend to talk about are linked very much in a future-oriented perspective. But I would also like to say that there is somewhat a renaissance of some of the communication ideals that were prevalent before the industrial society. The focus on interpersonal communication and sense-making actually is the origin of communication and communication theory. And it's not really new, but I think it's coming back. The second point is connected a little bit to how we organize things in organizations and institutions. And as Jesper introduced at the beginning, this concept of VUCA that has been around for some decades, focusing on the complexity of society and the surrounding society, very much challenges the way we work. Most professionals in communications, but also in other functions in organizations, have a linear mindset while doing their work. The idea here is to introduce somewhat a more holistic approach to how we do things in organizations, especially connected to the challenges out there, the wicked problems that we face. Third, I really do believe that communication is probably one of the most important forces of change and transformation in our society. It is also something that I think most leadership people and management people think, but they still don't seem to have the same belief in communication professionals, according to research. This divide I will dig into a little bit. Finally, some form of solution, which is more conceptual, maybe a little bit practical. Me and my colleagues have been very inspired by two fields of knowledge. One is crisis and crisis management, which I have been working with as a researcher for many years. We do think that the knowledge that we can get from crisis communication and crisis management can be used also for regular work in communications. And the second field of knowledge is fine arts, music, theater. The knowledge that comes from these fields have been unused when it comes to more traditional management and organizational development. So the solution from our point of view is to work more with ideas of narratives, which is also a very old tradition of creating sense, together with a strategic improvisation mindset. And I will introduce a little bit what I mean with that soon. We can speak about different paradigms when it comes to communication. We can say that we have went somehow from a paradigm that has been much more focused on vertical communication, from management to co-workers, from organizational centers to stakeholders, target groups, customers, citizens, etc., into a situation today where there is more interest in the horizontal processes. How can communication develop collaboration between people, between units, institutions at the same level? That is of quite more interest today, I would say, than it has been historically. We can also see that there was a time when public relations professionals, journalists, marketing people, advertising people, somehow had a monopoly of the tools of communication. And now, since some decades ago, and increasingly, we live in a world where everybody is a communicator, and actually some people can be really good at communicating without having some form of professional background. The focus when it comes to like some form of mode when it comes to communication has gone from the industrial focus on rational transmission of communication towards a situation today which probably is different in different parts of the world, but at least where I come from, there has been a stronger focus on ethos, on moral communication, on legitimacy aspects than ever before. The moral issues of communication and public relations are really in the center of the world right now. Steering model, communication to dominate or communication to collaborate, the same division. And then finally, of course, we have a world out there, in there, which is more transboundary than ever. The limits between internal and external communication is kind of blurred, and the limits between people as citizens and customers are also a little bit blurred. So we live in a more fragmented audience society. Oh, time is just running fast, isn't it? Some are models. I like models. I'm an academic, as many of you. This is also another way of describing this from a management standpoint, which I mentioned at the beginning. If you look far beyond industrial society, we call this the crafting society, and the main communication mode then was really communication as a direct dialogue, an interaction form. While management was more about showing examples and also about senior guidance in a way. Then we moved into the industrial society, and we have this monster of industrial management, which we all live with, which is very much focused on communication more as information and instruction, vertical perspectives, and management as a very specific discipline in different ways. And then the society we live in, this VUCA society, we can see that parts of this crafting society communication mode is coming back to us, focusing on management as interaction and dialogue again, and then also more management as sense-making and communication as sense-making is coming back in different ways, and work as expertise, but I can't dig into that right now. The model that we have created for this perspective, and I will explain it a little bit further, is what we call the strategic improvisation mindset. This is very much based on how artists work, how musicians work, and how the artistic world is working, combined with ideas from management. To make it simple, one could say that from a musical perspective, you always have a composition, notes that you follow. You write it down. This is like the strategy, the document, the plan that you try to develop. Then when you try to realize this, you need narratives to make it happen, to make people create sense of what you do. And then in a situation where things seem to happen very fast and you have to respond all the time, you need an improvisational mindset, which basically means that you can respond immediately to signals and changes around you. The perfect metaphor, the perfect organization here would be a jazz band where you have really no solo players, but a team that is very, very good at working together, taking turns, and also improvising depending on what happens in the connection to the audience. So this jazz metaphor, which has been used also by organizational theorists decades ago, is like the main metaphor for this ideal communicative organization, according to our thinking. Yeah, let's skip that one. When it comes to the idea of narratives, the whole idea of branding has been very strong in our society for many, many years. While we can see now that the ideas from humanistic storytelling and narrative theory is coming back more and more, probably because people have such a hard time to create sense of things, which Anne was also talking about. There's too much information, too less meaning, basically. Narratives is the way to create meaning for people. And there is a lot of theories, a lot of ideas of how to create stories and narratives, and I know that many of you are probably already very good at this, but this is just a recommendation to try to implement ideas from narrative theory and narrative thinking into what we do. We shouldn't really create brands anymore, we should create strategic narratives. That is like the main idea here. And of course, there are a lot of ideas around this. In the last issue, I think, of Harvard Business Review, which is also very much about communication nowadays, actually, which is interesting. There are some, this is typically agenda setting. There's a lot of stuff about narratives. It was popular 20 years ago, but it's come back again. And I think this is interesting as a new trend. And there are a lot of advice from management scholars at different universities of how to do this. This is just one example, which I think is very concrete in its advice and functions very well with what I've been talking about. Just one example, one ideal. I don't know if you know about IKEA. This is the last slide. I'm going to end, Giselle, I promise. One example of some form of ideal when it comes to developing a strategic improvisation mindset in the organization and a very narrative communication approach. There is this company called IKEA. Have you heard about it?
Yes.
It's probably in Indonesia too. It's a Swedish company. That's why I use it, of course. This is actually the founder of a company. I don't have much time here to talk about it, but if you want to look into some kind of ideal here, I think IKEA works very well. They have a very, very strong composition, strategy, ID, but they're also very, very fast and very, very agile when in their communication work, when it comes to adapting to and responding to what's happening around them in the digital world. But they're also very, very strong in their strategic narrative. And all this is very well connected. That's why we tend to use IKEA as a perfect example of what we talk about. I've also been working with IKEA the last year as an advisor, and they are, of course, as every other corporation, turning into something new in this digital world, but they are still keeping very, very firm in their fundamental narrative and so on. And there's a book coming next year. So,
yes.
Please. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much.